She stole my wedding dress and married my fiancé, so I called the police. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for future content. Annie sat in the bride's dressing room of the church, her hands folded gently in her lap so she wouldn't wrinkle her gloves. In 20 minutes, she would walk down the aisle and marry the love of her life, Brent Holloway. She could hear the soft murmur of guests filling the pews outside, chairs creaking, someone laughing too loud, the organist warming up. She let herself think, just for a moment, about her parents. They had passed away in a car accident 3 years earlier, and not a day went by that she didn't feel the hole they'd left behind. Today of all days, she wished they could be here. She imagined her father walking her down the aisle, her mother dabbing at her eyes in the front row. They would have been so proud of the woman she'd become, and so happy to see her marry someone she loved. Annie had one brother, Michael, a few years younger than her. He faced some intellectual challenges that meant he needed a little extra support in daily life, though nothing that stopped him from living independently with occasional supervision. He adored Annie. He'd been talking about her wedding for months, practicing his role in it, asking her a dozen times what he was supposed to do and when. There was a knock at the door, and Stephanie walked in, Annie's best friend since college and her maid of honor. Stephanie's smile was as warm as ever as she helped Annie step into her dress, careful with the delicate lace along the back, fastening each button like she'd done 100 times in her head already. "You look incredible," Stephanie said, straightening the train. "Brent is going to lose it when he sees you." Annie laughed and thanked her, feeling that fluttering electric nervousness that only comes once or twice in a lifetime. She excused herself to the small restroom attached to the dressing room for one last look in the mirror, one last check of her makeup before it was time. She heard the door close behind her. Then she heard something that didn't make sense at first, the heavy click of a lock turning from the outside. She tried the handle. It didn't budge. "Stephanie?" she called out, half laughing, thinking it was some kind of pre-wedding prank. "This isn't funny. Open the door." No answer. Just muffled movement on the other side. And then faintly, she heard her brother's voice. Michael, clapping his hands together the way he did when he was excited, saying it was a great joke, a really great joke, over and over. Annie pounded on the door. She called out for Stephanie, for anyone. But the room was soundproofed enough, tucked away enough, that no one heard her over the swell of the wedding march starting up in the sanctuary. On the other side of that door, Stephanie was wearing Annie's dress. She'd slipped it on the moment Annie stepped into the restroom and pulled the veil down low over her face, the same veil Annie had chosen because it belonged to her mother. With the veil down, from a distance in the golden light of the church, no one would know the difference. Not until the ceremony was over, and the veil was lifted for the kiss. Annie would spend a long time afterward believing Brent had to have noticed. Surely he'd know his own bride, the woman he'd asked to marry him. But Brent never noticed because Brent already knew. The ceremony went on exactly as planned. Vows were exchanged. Rings were slid onto fingers. And Stephanie and Brent were pronounced husband and wife in front of everyone Annie had ever loved, while Annie sat locked in a bathroom in her wedding gown's twin, listening to her own wedding happen without her. Because that's what it was. Brent had known about the plan the entire time. In fact, it had been his idea just as much as Stephanie's. The two of them had been having an affair for 6 months, behind Annie's back, while she picked out flowers and cake flavors and seating charts for a wedding that was supposed to be hers. Stephanie, it turned out, couldn't afford a wedding of her own. So instead of admitting the affair, instead of ending things like decent people, she and Brent had simply decided to take Annie's. And the worst part, the part that would stay, with Annie longest, was that they'd used her brother to do it. They told Michael it was a harmless prank, a funny surprise for Annie, and please just hold the door for a few minutes and don't let her out until they said so. He had no idea what he was really part of. He trusted them completely the way he trusted everyone, and they used that trust like a tool. When the reception was finally winding down, someone remembered to let Annie out. It was Michael who came to unlock the door, confused now, sensing something was wrong but not understanding what. Annie stepped out of that small bathroom still in her gown, mascara streaked down her face, and found out everything all at once. The affair, the switch, the fact that somewhere just beyond those doors, Brent and Stephanie were now legally married. She looked at her brother's stricken, apologetic face and felt her heart break all over again, because she knew immediately it wasn't his fault. He'd been a pawn in someone else's cruelty, told a lie by two people he loved and trusted, and he'd believed them the way he believed everyone. Annie didn't confront Brent. She didn't confront Stephanie. She didn't scream or cry or demand answers, in front of the guests still lingering by the gift table. She walked out of that church, got in her car still wearing her wedding dress, and drove straight to the police station. She explained everything. The locked door, the switched dress, the veil. The fact that she had never consented to any of it, had been physically confined against her will while a legal ceremony took place using her identity, her guest list, her fiancé, and her name on the marriage license paperwork that had been filled out in advance. It didn't take long for the police to understand the seriousness of what she was describing. They drove to the venue. The reception was still going, some of the guests still unaware that anything was wrong, when officers walked in and arrested Brent and Stephanie in front of everyone. They were charged with kidnapping and false imprisonment, and later with fraud, once it became clear how deliberately the whole thing had been planned. The case went to trial months later. Annie sat in the courtroom and listened as the full extent of it came out. The 6-month affair, the fabricated wedding budget Stephanie couldn't cover, the forged paperwork, the manipulation of her brother, all of it laid out in front of Vi, a judge and jury. In the end, Brent and Stephanie were found guilty. They were ordered to pay full restitution for the cost of the wedding, every last flower and place setting, and each sentenced to 2 years in prison. As the bailiff stepped forward to lead them out of the courtroom, Annie stood. She looked at Stephanie, still in her plain gray jail clothes where a wedding dress once was. She looked at Brent, who couldn't quite meet her eyes, and she said, calm and steady, "Wasn't this the best joke ever?" Then she turned and walked out of that courtroom, and didn't look back. If you enjoyed the video and would like to see more like it, please like and subscribe.